Hi, my name is Mayana and welcome to my Accord. Today I'm going to be doing my December wrap-up. I was putting this video off because I read 50 books in December. Technically I actually read 49, but we're just gonna say 50 for the sake of it. It wasn't on purpose, like it wasn't something that like I strive to do. It's just that like I had so many books that I did not want to start, that so many books that I wanted to end the year off with reading, or so many books that I wanted to read before the year started, that I kind of just ended up reading 49 books. Also, I think like the last week of December I remember I had read like 9 books in 4 days, and I read much more than that, but like I was doing that kind of stuff. So like I wanted to end my year off with me not having any books on my Libby, which like kind of didn't make any sense because I ended up putting more books on my Libby at the beginning of the year, but whatever. So let's just go through it. But there are going to be some books I'm going to talk about first that I've like talked about in other videos, or books that I just don't want to talk about to save time, because reason why I've been putting out this video is because I didn't know how I want to do it. So I'm gonna go through the books that I kind of don't want to discuss, and I'm sorry but I'm not gonna upload any pictures for them, because my least favorite thing about editing is putting the pictures on the screen. So I'm not going to do that for these books. So I'm just going to go through them really fast, and then I'm going to get into the actual books that I want to talk about. So I read Slave Bride, which I gave 2 stars. That was a Christmas book. I read Babel, which I gave 3 stars. I have a reading vlog on it. I read Not So Merry Memories. I gave 3 stars. Resting Scrooge Face, I gave 3 stars. Be My Christmas Treat, I gave 2 stars. The Holidays, I gave 3 stars. And those are all like Christmas books I read. I recommended some of them in like a Christmas recommendation video that like nobody cared about. Then I read These Vine Delights, which I gave 1 star, which was in a reading vlog. I read The Heir by Nina Malone, which I gave no stars because it is a novella. I read Legendborn, which I gave 3 stars. It was in the same reading vlog as These Vine Delights. I read You Made a Fool of Beauty with Your Death, which I gave 3 stars, and I talked about this in my worst books of 2022. I read American Royalty, which I gave 3 stars, and I talked about this in my most disappointing books of 2022. I read The Golden Enclaves, which I gave 2 stars, and I talked about this in the same video as American Royalty. I read The Folk of the Air. I reread The Folk of the Air trilogy, all 5 stars, duh. I read Daisy Hates, which I gave 2 stars, and this was also in my worst books of 2022. I read Finna and Defect. These are both 5 stars. I talk about them both in my best books of 2022. Vanessa Jarrett's Got a Man, 5 stars, also in best books of 2022. If You Could See the Sun, Anxious People, and The Great Alone, I all gave 5 stars, and I talked about them all in my best books of 2022. So now let's get into the actual books that I read. Okay, so the rest of these books are going to basically be like 4 stars and lower, unfortunately. So the first book I want to talk about is, can you see this? Cheeky Royal by Nana Malone. I read a lot of Nana Malone books. This is a Black author, and some of her books are Black characters, I believe, but some of them are like not. So I read a bunch of her books in the beginning of December because I really like her writing. I think that she's a very interesting author. And also I was looking for like bodyguard romances, and I came across her books. And then she writes a lot of like billionaire stories, and a lot of like, they're not like fairy tale stories, like, you know, she writes a lot of prince and like stuff like that. Like she writes a lot of royalty stories, but they're not like fantasy. So I thought that was very interesting. But this is a like very long series, but you can read them. They're like duologies. So the first 2 books is called The Royals Undone. So this is book 1, and this is about this guy who is a prince, and he is off to look for this kid who he believes is his brother. And the king, I believe, hires the main character, who is Black, to basically be like his bodyguard, but she like is a bodyguard from like a distance, so she's kind of like protecting him. And they actually end up sparking like this romance, and I thought it was really interesting because she's also like his bodyguard, but he does not know that, and they're also childhood friends. And I just found this book very interesting, especially because like she's a Black girl, she's a bodyguard, it had smut, like it was just like very very interesting. And then I read Cheeky King. I gave them both 5 stars because they kind of, even though they're 2 separate books, they kind of read as one. And these books are very quick. These books are like 200 pages or 100 pages on my iPad, which is like 200 pages. Read Bastard Prince and Royal Bastard, which I gave both 3 stars, and these follow the brother. I kind of didn't care about these because I think the main female character was white, and I didn't care. I'm sorry. I also read a Christmas book called Tangle and Tinsel. I gave this book 5 glowing stars. This is a smut book. This is kind of like what I was looking for, because a lot of the Christmas books that I was reading were like very like cutesy, and like that's just kind of like what I wasn't really looking for. So this one is about this girl named Sam, and she is an interior designer, and she is designing this house for these rich boys in her town. It's like 3 of them, and they end up getting snowed in together, and they start like this romance, or like not really a romance, but like very smutty. And I really liked it because the main character doesn't really have like a race. Like the author wrote it so like anybody could like see themselves in the main character, which I thought was like very, very interesting. It was something new, and I really liked that, and I just had the time of my life reading this book. I'm not gonna lie, this was so fun. And I had The Last Minute First Lady, which I got an arc of. This is about this reporter who kind of like gets herself into shit a lot, and she meets this guy, and he wants to be the governor of Chicago. Could be wrong, but something with like politics, okay? And they end up fake dating each other because he needs like a wife because people won't take him seriously, and she ends up like, somebody catches them in the hallway like in a very compromising position, and so they end up like fake dating. And I gave this book 3 stars. I just didn't feel convinced of their romance. I personally felt like you spent a lot of the book reading about them separately in their separate personal lives, and you don't really spend a lot of the book of them like together. I do like them as a couple, but like I wasn't really convinced of the romance, if that makes sense, because I don't know, like you just spend a lot of time like their personal lives, like a little bit more than what I would have liked. But I love this cover, and I'm very grateful that I got an arc. It was fun to read, but the romance just like wasn't really convincing. I didn't hate it. It wasn't terrible. It just like, I just feel like the author should have spent more time focusing on the romance than the characters' personal lives. Then I read Southern Storms, which I gave 3 stars. This one is about this, it's like a childhood friends and lovers, but like not really. It's about these characters who grew up together as children, and then the girl like moves away, and she is in this abusive relationship, and she ends up moving, well, no, sorry, it wasn't an abusive relationship. Her husband was just a piece of shit. Or was he abusive? He was a piece of shit regardless. And so he leaves her, and she moves to this small town, and there's this guy who like lives in the middle of the woods, who's an asshole who everyone hates. And so this is just about like their romance. I just thought it was like okay. It wasn't really like anything special. So 3 stars. But the main character was black. So I read a lot of black authors in December. Then I read God of Malice by Rita Kent. This is like the first Rita Kent book I've read in a while, because I did read her, what is it, the books that take place in high school, which ironically this is about their children. I never finished the series that took place in their high school. I did like them when I read them, but I just never ended up finishing them because I just decided that I didn't really care about high school bully romances anymore. Like, even though that was like my favorite thing, I just cannot read about characters in high school anymore, so I kind of just stopped reading the series. This one I gave 3 stars. I didn't hate it. Obviously I gave it 3 stars. I just feel like maybe I'm not really into dark romance anymore, because like I don't know, I just kept getting like, I don't know, like it just didn't need to be dark, I guess. Like, I don't know, it's about this girl, and she is grieving her best friend's death, and she's about to commit, you know, on this bridge, and this guy ends up coming up to her, and he's like, do it. She's like, what? He's like, do it. And she's like, no. He's like, okay, well, you owe me something now. She's like, what? And it follows like the kids of like her other series, and they end up like sparking this romance. And it's just like, I just feel like it didn't really need to be dark. I don't know, I just don't really have a love for dark romance anymore. I don't really know, like I just feel like it was doing too much. Like, it just did not need to. It was this scene that disgusted me, where he like tried to force her to like give him, you know, and she clearly wasn't into it. It was like the beginning of the story. She didn't even know his name, like none of that. And I'm just like, I'm just not like, this is not sexy to me. Like, I don't know, like I feel like I may be growing out of dark romances, or maybe authors should really authentically write dark romances, or I think I'm just not really into dark romances where the character is getting sexually assaulted. I've never really been into those, to be honest, but I don't know, like there are a lot of, like, back in the day when before dark romance was like a popular genre, like authors would do this thing where they would kind of push those boundaries. They wouldn't go all the way to those boundaries, they would kind of push those boundaries, and I thought that was fun. But like since TikTok kind of blew up dark romance, a lot of authors have pushed those boundaries and went way farther. And I'm not saying Rena Kent did, it's just like it's not something that I'm interested in anymore, and I wish that we could go back to when romance authors really didn't go that far, because it kind of ruined dark romance for me, because I'm like, okay, this is too much. I've never really kind of been into like the consent thing. So this book I read is the Lovecon. This book is about these best friends, and they are fake dating because she tells, like, she's basically like in this contest of like cosplaying, and so she tells the people that she's the contest that she enters, they need partners for, and like they need to like live together. I don't know, I don't do like these kind of like con things, so I don't know, but it kind of didn't make sense to me. I don't know, my issue with fake dating trope nowadays is that it's such a popular trope that like nobody authentically writes the trope, and now I feel like only YA can do it because like they have reasons to do fake dating, whereas like adults don't have reasons to do fake dating unless it's like for a wedding. And a lot of the reasons why these books do fake dating, I think it just does not make sense to me. Like no matter how much it sounds believable, it just does not make sense to me. So like they're already roommates, but they convince people that they're a couple, and so they have to, like, he's already in love with her and they have to like work together. But yeah, this book, it just didn't really hit. It was just 3 stars. The romance was like okay, it was just a fine book. Like it wasn't all of that in a bag of chips. Okay, so the next book that I want to talk about is The Secret Society of Irregular Witches, and I gave this book 2.5 stars. This is about this girl who is a witch, and like it's kind of like a contemporary world, so like witches don't exist but they do, and she's a part of this group that meets like once in a while, and she ends up going to work at this school to help these 3 children who are witches, and like teach them specifically because they don't have anybody to teach them. And so she ends up going there, and I just like found this book very boring. It didn't really have any plot, I didn't really have any likable characters, and then the romance between the main character and the love interest, like it just was not believable to me. Like don't get me wrong, I love my like grumpy asshole characters, but he was just too much of an asshole. It's like the author almost didn't know how to write romance, because like they weren't giving. And I was just extremely bored throughout the entire book. This book I have is 7 Days in June. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. This one I thought I was gonna love. This is about this main character. She writes, like, they're both like black, by the way, as everybody knows, but just in case you don't know. She writes paranormal romance, and she has like this very popular paranormal romance series, and he writes whatever he writes, but he is a well-known author, and then like in his spare time he like goes and helps kids in like poor schools that he like sees himself in. And she has a daughter, and one day there's like this author seminar being held, and he's there and she runs into him, and they also start reminiscing over when they were kids in high school and they spent 7 days in June together. And I just found this book boring. I didn't really care about them as like couples. I felt like they were more so like insta love, and like yeah, this was a second chance romance, but we spent so much time going back and forth between them in high school and them as adults that I just did not end up caring about them as a couple, because I don't really like insta love. And like yeah, second chance romance does eat, but it eats when, I think what lost me is that scene where they were like seeing how they were in high school. I think that's where they lost me, because in second chance romance I like kind of hearing about it and not like seeing it, if that makes sense. And yeah, this book just kind of lost me, unfortunately. The next book I have is The Fifth Season, which I finally read. I gave this book 3 stars. As you can see, this is my tab when I read it the first time. And what was this tab for? Oh, anyways, whatever. So this book is a fantasy book. It is about the earth that like goes through changes like every few years, and you are following a group of characters, and I just thought this book was okay. I think I put it off for too long, and then by the time I got to the plot twist, I kind of, I got it, but like I was just like, you know, like the plot twist wasn't that big of a deal. But I think the plot twist, like whatever the plot point of this book makes it, and the fact that it's written in second person and everything, I'm just not interested in reading the rest of the trilogy. I may have to reread this book another time because I found myself struggling to listen to the audiobook, and maybe I would need to read this book physically. But I already have and own the trilogy, so maybe I'll give it another shot, because to me it was just okay. Like it wasn't as amazing as like everybody else says that it is. And then I read Part of Your World, which I also gave 3 stars. I read this one because this gave Grey's Anatomy tease, and I have been looking for books that give that. So this is about this woman who is an older woman, and she works in the hospital, and her ex-boyfriend, he was like abusive, and like nobody really knew that he was abusive. No, was he? Yeah, he was abusive. Yeah, he was like mentally abusive, verbally abusive, and nobody really knew that, but everybody knew that he cheated on her. So everybody's like trying to get her to get back with him, and she ends up like getting stuck on the side of the road, and this guy saves her in like this small town, and she ends up sparking this romance with him. And I thought the book was okay. It just didn't, like, the trope. I don't know, I like my romance books to have tropes, and like this is just 2 people who met and they like liked each other and they started hooking up, and it's like, I would just watch a TV show if I wanted this. Like, I specifically like my romance books to have like fun tropes, and this didn't really have any of that. And also, one thing that really irritated me was like she just kept talking about how much older she was than him, and like it just was like really annoying at a certain point. Like, I get it, like dating someone who's younger than you is different, but she was literally 38 and he was 28. Like, they were like 10 years apart, but it's like, it's not like she was like 28 and he was 18. Like, it wasn't like that. Like, it was like very much like normal and fine, but she just kept talking about it and whining about it, and I was just like, okay, we get it. And then I read Legend in Lattes, which I gave 2 stars. Everyone loves this book. This is like the booktube angel. It is about this orc who is building like this coffee shop for like other like monsters in like this fantasy world, and I just thought it was really boring. It didn't really have a plot. I don't really like cozy fantasies. I'm finding out, like, I don't like fantasy books that don't have a plot because I feel like it's a waste of time. And like, even if like, I'm not saying like this book has to like, they have to go out and like fight other monsters or do fun stuff, but I don't know, give me something fun with the cafe. Like, it was nothing there, and so I just found it like really boring, and I hated it. And then I also read Honey and Spice, which I also gave 3 stars. And this is about this girl who has this like radio show, and she ends up like fake dating this guy at her college because she talks shit about him, and then he like confronted her about it, and so like they end up fake dating. I gave this 3 stars because I just feel like they didn't have a reason to fake date. Like I said earlier, like the fake dating trope is kind of losing me because nobody really has a reason to fake date anymore. Like, everyone is just like, let me see, like fake dating is a really popular trope, like let me see if I can fit this into my book. Also, this book read like Dear White People to me. Like, it was just very like, talked about like black commentary a lot, and that's just not something I was looking for in my romance books. Like, I don't mind it, but it's kind of like, it kind of took me out of the romance book. And I had like a lot of pop culture references, which I love Beyonce, but the mentioning of Beyonce so many times was so annoying. Like, I don't care. Like, I hate pop culture references in books in general, and it was like, I don't know, it just really got annoying.
Also, I was gonna add on, I don't know why I thought I was in your video. I thought you were like, fake dating tropes are very 2004 when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, it's very early 2000s. We're out of it. We don't need her.
Yeah, and it's like, adults can't have fake dating. I feel like adults don't have a reason to be fake dating unless it's like a wedding.
Right, you have to bring, like the holidays thing, you have to bring somebody to your family.
Yeah, like I get what holiday fake dating shows, but it's like, none of these fake dating books make any sense. Like, when you read it, you're like, oh, okay. But it's like, why are you fake dating for a talk show? That doesn't make any sense to me. Right. Like, whatever. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is These Hollow Places, which I gave 2.5 stars. This is about this girl who ends up going back to her hometown to work at this museum, and she ends up finding a hole in the wall that leads to a different world. And when I first started this book, I actually really was liking it. Like, I thought it was like very interesting. I thought it was like very new, but it was really boring. Like, after she finds the hole in the wall, the story really goes nowhere, to be honest. And I just like found myself dreading the end. And then I read Better Than Fiction, which I gave 1 star. This is about this girl who doesn't really like to read books, but she ends up inheriting this bookstore, and then this popular author who ends up like coming to this bookstore, and they spark this romance, and I just didn't like it. I hated it. I thought it was boring. I didn't really care about the like love interest, and I know some people hate when like all I have to say about a book is that I thought it was boring, but that's just how I felt, unfortunately. And then I read the Scourge Between Stars. This is by a black author. This is a sci-fi, this is like a space sci-fi book, and so this book actually isn't out yet. It's coming out later this year, I think in April. But I requested an article on NetGalley because I was like, duh, yay, space sci-fi black, like duh. I ended up giving it 3 stars, and so I thought this was just like okay. I thought it was just fine. This is about this like ship, and it's like it gives like Final Family vibes. So they're on the ship, and these aliens end up invading their ship. So it's like a horror sci-fi, but I just thought it was okay. I don't think that horror sci-fi is like my thing, because I've tried to read Dead Silence, and like I just cannot make it through that book. And like this book was also really short. It was like 200 pages long, so I don't feel like I knew the characters well enough. I don't really feel like I really understood a lot of the characters' motivations. But also I think that this book shouldn't have been that much longer, because I probably would have ended up hating it. So, and then I read The Exception, which also riding that wave of Grey's Anatomy teas. I just started watching Grey's Anatomy for the first time in December. I am on season 5. I don't know when I'm going to finish it. I do want to, but I don't know when I'm going to, because I have so many books I want to read at the beginning of the year, and I stopped watching because I had so many books I want to end the year with. But I wanted, this is actually what sparked me to watch Grey's Anatomy, because somebody commented, they was like, you should just watch Grey's Anatomy. So I was like, okay. So I started watching it, and I became obsessed. So this book is about this girl who works in this hospital, and she ends up coming across this guy who also, like, he starts working in the hospital. Like, she comes across this guy, like, she's on an airplane, and she is trying to help someone, but he is like also trying to help, but he's being an asshole about it. And then she's going to work, and he ends up starting a job there, and so like it's kind of like a love to hate thing. I just found the book very boring, and like I hate that like that's all I have to say about a lot of these books. But unfortunately, like if I'm not having a fun time, I'm kind of just like okay. But I always continue on reading a book, because you never know what you're going to end up loving. Like there are sometimes that's the whole point of the book, is to be boring in the beginning and then really good in the end. But I just didn't care about the romance. Like didn't care. The next book I have is Sunny Disposition. This is a hockey romance with a black female main character. This is about Naomi, who is a gamer, and she also, I don't remember. She's a gamer, and then it's about Finn, who is a hockey player, but he's also a gamer. They're friends online, but they don't know that they're friends online, because they both have like, you know, online names. And he ends up finding out who she is first. They also are kind of like roommates. They kind of like all live in like the same house. And so he ends up finding out who she is first, but she doesn't know who he is. And this book is really quick. It's about 200 pages, but I just thought this book was like okay. Like their romance, I mean, this was like very interesting. It kind of is enemy. It's kind of like hate to love, but not really, because he's still interested in her, and he knows who she is, but she doesn't know who he is. And like she's just like this happy, like go lucky girl who's like living life. She's like, oh, he's an asshole, but like whatever. And it's like I just thought it was like fine. I think I went into this with too much high expectations. Like I just thought I was gonna love this, and then when I didn't, I was kind of just like, oh. You know, I mean, I read this book. I haven't thought about it since. But this book has a second book called Team Player. So I'll probably check that out. I probably will continue on with the series. But I really wanted to love this one, and I did not. Which is unfortunate, because I made a Pinterest board about it. And I read Notes on Your Execution, which I gave 3 stars. This is a BookTube darling. This is about this guy who killed someone and he is being put on trial, and you follow the POV of like 3 different people. And like I just did not think this book was like as astonishing as everybody else said it did. It wasn't like that thought-provoking. I also don't think that this book really brought in new ideas that, like, you know, other booktubers were like trying to say that it did. Like, I've read those ideas before and it just like wasn't really anything special, honestly. And I kind of just like, I didn't really care about any of the characters. The plot line was like fine, but like I don't know, I kind of like need to care about something when I'm reading a book. And I didn't like hate it or anything else. I just thought the book was like fine, and it didn't live up to the booktube hype in my opinion. I'm not saying that it's not worth a read or anything like that. I'm just saying for me it didn't live up to that hype. And then I read, I'm gonna need to read the title for this one because it's long. 10 minutes and 38 seconds in this strange world, and I gave this book 4 stars. This is about this girl. She is Muslim and she is dying. Someone killed her and they put her in this trash can, and so the last 10 minutes on earth she is recalling her life. And then I want to say like the last half of the book is about her friends and them trying to find out what happened and them trying to give her the proper burial, because I believe she was a disgrace to her family. Because I think this is like historical. I think she was a prostitute, or she like worked in a brothel or something like that. I really can't remember. And like she was like a disgrace to her family, and so she like so a lot of people in her area like really wrote her off a lot. And so her friends are trying to give her the proper burial, and you're going through her life through like the 10 minutes of her last few breaths. And I just thought this book was so clever. I really love the main character. This feels weird to say, but it gave like found family vibes, even though they were all like her friends. But these are like very different people. You have someone who's transgender, you have someone who is a man who is like her childhood friend that married someone else and he felt like he should have married her. Like you just have like so many different people in this story, and I just thought that that was like very special. And so this book, I don't know, I just thought this book was like really cool and it was fun and it was interesting. But my problem is that it felt like 2 different books at sometimes, because of the point is you're going through her life and how she dies. I mean your life and, you know, when she's dying, but then you switch to like the friends, and so it just felt like 2 different stories, but I really didn't mind that. And then I read This Vicious Grace, which I gave 3 stars. This is a fantasy book. This is about I almost said some girl. This is about this girl and she can't touch people. If she touches people they die, but she also needs to find someone to marry for like her kingdom. And she's like held very important in this like society, and she ends up going to find her own bodyguard, and she ends up like sparking this romance with her bodyguard. I did enjoy this book. This like I would say maybe a 3.5 stars, almost a 4. Like I'll continue on with the series. This book was a YA carbon copy of From Blood and Ash and Shatter Me, but like definitely From Blood and Ash. Like at first when I was reading this book, like I was joking like during my updates, and I was like, this is a From Blood and Ash carbon copy, until I got to this one scene and I knew exactly what they were leading up to as I was reading, because basically in this like fantasy world there are like books that people written, and I already know once they introduce the books to the story, I said I know exactly where this is going. So then she is like, basically it's the same exact scene from Blood and Ash, where she reads books but she also like reads smut, and he ends up finding out and making fun of her for it, and like that happens in This Vicious Grace, and it definitely was stolen from Blood and Ash. But maybe Jennifer Armentrout deserves it from like all the fucking plot lines she stole from other authors over the years. So like it was funny to me. Like it wasn't something I was like that serious about. But like I feel like this book didn't really bring anything new to the table. It literally was a carbon, like it literally, like the plot line sounds like if you took Shatter Me and From Blood and Ash and put it together. Like it wasn't anything new, it wasn't anything really original. I thought the romance between the 2 characters were good, but it wasn't anything that like I love these characters and like fawning over them. I thought it was just fine, but I will continue on with it because I did think it was like very interesting. And then the last book that I read in December was Bear Town, which I gave 5 stars. I read another Frederick Backman that month, Anxious People, and I gave that one I think 5 stars as well. So I ended up going into 2022 reading Bear Town like trilogy, and like I ended up giving them 5 stars, all 5 stars. So I ended the year off with the 5-star read and started the year off with the 5-star read. But unfortunately I read Bear Town after I filmed my best books of 2020 too. So that's why I hate filming my videos so early, because I'm like, imagine if I would have filmed this like 2 weeks earlier. There would have been a good chunk of books that I would have like left out. But Beartown, how do I explain this book? This book is about this small town. I think this is in like Sweden. I'm so sorry. This like, it's not in America. It's a small town in another country, and it is about this town called Beartown, and they have their hockey team is their pride and joy. It keeps their lights on. It funds a lot of like the places in the community, and there is something happens that is at the risk of this town losing their like funding and like ruining this town. And it's not really a spoiler, but like I wasn't expecting it to when it happened, but I feel like this thing shouldn't have been a call, like it shouldn't be considered a spoiler. But if you don't want to know what this book is about, you would go in blind, I would say just know I gave it 5 stars and absolutely loved it. But basically this girl is sexually assaulted by one of these town star players, and the town ends up basically not believing this girl and picking on her because the guy that essayed her is like a star, and they just don't want to believe it, and they think that she's just trying to ruin his career. And it is just like such a beautiful story. It follows a bunch of different people. The book starts off with a child going into the woods and holding a gun to another child's head, and so you are going through the book trying to figure out like who the fuck it was and what was their motive. And it could have been like literally any other character in the story. There's a character who is getting bullied. There are some characters who are on the hockey team, and I love this little small town of Beartown and its fucked up people. And I know you're probably being like, Lana, like what? The second book and the third book, like not everybody in this town is like fucked up, and you don't really read about the people who like don't really believe her, and you follow like the adults and the teens, and you also follow these teens as they like grow up through the series. And I just love this town. Like I love small towns, and I think I like them better when they're not romances, because they focus on the small town aspect. And it just like this, I love tight-knit small towns, and this book like gave, not tight-knit, but like small towns where it's like only 3 people in a classroom, like small towns like that. And it just like, this was just like such a precious book, and it was actually very feminist for it to have been written by a man. And I literally have one more book by Frederick Bachman to read and give it 5 stars for him to be considered my all-time favorite author, which I don't have. I've yet to have one of those, so I think that's funny. But I made this tweet and I was like, Frederick Bachman is to adult me as to what John Green was to teen me, because I was obsessed with John Green. He was like my favorite author. Frederick Bachman, like he writes John Green for adults, like a little bit more, like obviously a little bit, no offense to John Green, but like a little bit better writing. But like all of his books are like amazing. He has amazing characters, like characters that you can just love, and like just the way his writing was, it's just like so good and beautiful. And I'm just very happy that I ended my month off with a 5-star read, but also my year off with a 5-star read. And then also like I started my year off with 2 5-star reads, and something like to look forward to. And how it was written was so beautiful, because when I first read it, I ended up giving it 4 stars because I just didn't feel all the way connected to the characters. And then I read on in the series, and like these characters ended up becoming like my neighbors. Like I know these people, like I know them, like I live with them, I know them. And yeah, I loved it. So that's it for this video. Also, I want to state, just in case anybody was like thinking like, oh, all these books like seem like it seemed like I had like a terrible reading month. I had an amazing reading month. Most of my books ended up going into my best of the year video, so I couldn't really talk about them because I didn't want to waste time talking about them twice. So if it seems like I hated all the books that I read this month, I actually had the fucking time of my life, and I had so much fun reading all these books. Like, do not feel burnt out whatsoever, ironically. Just in case like wondering or worrying that like I might have hated everything that I read this month, I absolutely had a blast. So yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in my next one.